My name is Martin Partridge. I'm a trustee of the Swallowtail and Birdwing Butterfly Trust, and it's my pleasure to present this talk, co-authored by our chairman, Dr. Mark Collins. Our presentation builds on the previous four speakers' talks about the conservation status of the birdwing butterflies. We've heard from Matt Cecil and Dr. Ian Ginter about the wonderful work that has been carried out over a number of decades now to protect the Richmond birdwing in Eastern Australia. We've also heard about the latest genomic analysis for the conservation of the Queen Alexandras birdwing in Papua New Guinea from Dr. Fabian Condamine, and from Steve Sutton on the highly successful community work going on to conserve the Kinabalu birdwing in the Malaysian parts of Borneo. Birdwings are found over an extensive area of the Eastern Hemisphere. Most authorities recognise 36 species of birdwing. This slide here shows the regional distributions of the three genera of Troioides with 21 species, Trogonoptera with 2 species, and Ornithoptera with 13 species. All birdwing butterflies are listed on Appendix 2 of CITES, meaning that international trade in them is licensed and monitored, apart from Queen Alexandra's birdwing, which is listed on CITES Appendix 1, meaning that is threatened with extinction and commercial trade in wild-caught specimens is illegal. Of these 36, 12 are listed as endangered, vulnerable, or near threatened in the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, a resource that recently updated the 1985 assessments in the IUCN Red Data Book, Threatened Swallowtail Butterflies of the World. This talk discusses the problems that these 12 most threatened species face and highlights the importance of protecting key areas for them. We've heard about 3 of these 12 already from previous speakers. This presentation uses the wonderful resources that are now publicly available on the internet. Firstly, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature has created the IUCN Red List, a web-based resource that allows you to look at the distribution of more than 134,000 species, including these threatened birdwings. As well as the IUCN Red List category and more detailed text about what is known about each individual species. From this, we've been able to generate distribution maps for each of the individual species using QGIS, a free and open source geographic information system. A second excellent resource is the World Database on Protected Areas, WDPA for short, which is maintained for the IUCN Commission on National Parks and Protected Areas at the United Nations Environmental Programme World Conservation Monitoring Centre based in Cambridge in the UK. This has details of more than 265,000 protected areas around the world. Protected Planet is the authoritative source of data on protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures, or OECMs for short. It exists due to the efforts of governments and other stakeholders to map, monitor, and report data on protected areas and OECMs. Through the Protected Planet website, users can explore the World Database on Protected Areas, World Database on OECMs, the Global Database on Protected Area Management Effectiveness, and a wealth of associated information. Birdwings mainly inhabit tropical rainforests, particularly primary forests, but secondary forests are also a habitat for some species. The habitats required can be loosely divided into emergent sites and nectaring sites. An emergent site is one where the larval food plants grow and where eggs, larvae, and pupae occur. Nectaring sites are those where nectar-producing flowers are utilised by the birdwings. Many birdwings are found in lowland tropical forests. In fact, 10 of the 12 birdwings discussed here are predominantly lowland species, so are likely to be more prone to habitat destruction by logging or subsistence farming than montane species. However, some do occur at higher elevations, For example, Rothschild's birdwing has its center of altitude range around 2,000 meters elevation, and the Kinabalu birdwing occurs only above around 750 meters. Birdwings rely heavily, if not solely, on species of vine from the Aristolochia family as the larval food plant of choice. In many cases, they are very particular about which species is used. As a consequence of co-evolution, the distribution of birdwing butterflies is strongly linked to the distribution of their host plant or plants. Aristolochia are a type of vine and appear to need an appropriate amount of shade as well as physical support for them to be able to flourish. Having access to the individual birdwing distributions and the protected areas has allowed us to create maps showing where the birdwing habitats and protected areas overlap. Most importantly, these maps also tell us where there are no protected areas in a birdwing's distribution. Of course, the presence of a protected area does not necessarily mean it was set up to protect birdwings, more likely to be birds and mammals. In some cases, the authorities are unaware or perhaps unconcerned that rare butterflies are to be found at these sites. After all, it was only very recently that the Kinabalu birdwing, whose main habitat is in a World Heritage Site, began to receive significant recognition. This slide highlights the areas where these 12 threatened species are found, 11 in Southeast Asia and 1 in Australia, the Richmond birdwing. The Southeast Asian countries where the birdwings are found include Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Papua New Guinea. For a number of birdwings, very little is known about the species, its life cycle, or its food plant or plants, and studies have been hampered by the often remote and difficult access to the habitats. In some cases, this problem can be compounded by the sensitivities of the local people whose land they are found on. The discussions on a species level for the first few species in particular show how restricted in range they can be. So just a bit of background, where there is a protected area which overlaps with the birdwings distribution, it is shown in green in the maps. And the birdwing distribution is shown in a different color, which matches this slide here. So I'm now going to give more detail on each of the 12 birdwings. So starting with Queen Alexandras birdwing, this has been assessed as endangered by the IUCN. The female of this species is recognized as the largest butterfly in the world. Dr. Fabien Condamine's recent genomic analysis has been discussed previously, and he has ascertained that the two isolated populations found around the plains of Popondetta and on the Managalas Plateau in Papua New Guinea are genetically one single population. Only the Managalas Plateau is covered by protected area legislation, and this was only established in 2017 and encompasses 3,600 square kilometers of rainforest. The two populations exist in quite different altitudinal ranges, the plains being fairly flat coastal region of volcanic ash deeply dissected by rivers. Managalas Plateau being at around 2,400 to 2,600 feet or 730 to 790 meters in elevation with many volcanic features. The two distribution areas for the birdwing butterfly here are more than 30 kilometers apart at the nearest point. Rothschild's birdwing has been assessed as being near threatened. It has one of the most restricted ranges of any birdwing butterfly, being found only in the higher elevations of the Arfak Mountains in West Papua, part of Indonesia. Part of its range sits inside the Arfak protected area of 683 square kilometers. The Arfak Mountains are a very important area for birdwing butterflies and also many other taxa. This region has 6 species of birdwings, making it probably the most species-rich location for them anywhere in the world, including 2 other species of concern that we will talk about here. The Obi Island birdwing has been assessed as vulnerable. Its distribution is restricted to just one small island in the Indonesian province of North Maluku. Very little is known about this birdwing, but the distribution map suggests it's principally a lowland butterfly. This is concerning as the island has been extensively logged in the lowlands, but there is still a more or less pristine rainforest on the slopes of the highest peaks, which have been included in a protected area of 161 square kilometres. The Buru opalescent birdwing has been assessed as vulnerable. It also occurs on a very small island in the Indonesian province of Maluku. There is one very small overlapping protected area on the east of the island, the Masbate National Park, which is just 6.25 square kilometres in size. The stunning Wallace's golden birdwing has been assessed as near threatened. This birdwing is restricted just to a few islands in the Indonesian Maluku Islands. The islands on which this birdwing occurs are typically mountainous, and as a lowland species primarily occurs below 500 metres, it is at great risk from continuing deforestation. There are 2 national parks on the islands, but they cover more of the highlands and do not overlap much with the birdwing's lowland habitats. The species is close to being classified as vulnerable by the IUCN based on the loss of available habitat. The Palawan birdwing, a close relative of the Raja Brooks's birdwing, has been assessed as near threatened. This species has a relatively restricted range, being confined to the island of Palawan in the Philippines and a few surrounding islands. The species is primarily reported from densely forested woodland at low to medium altitudes up to 500 metres. Adults can often be seen at forest margins in areas of secondary growth and along streams, although they are thought to avoid clearings and open spaces. Palawan has a number of protected areas covering most of the island landmass. The Telur black birdwing has been assessed as vulnerable. This lowland species occurs in northern Indonesia on the Talaud Islands and the Sangi Islands, between the Indonesian islands of Sulawesi and Mindanao in the Philippines. Altitudinally, the species occurs between 1 and 200 metres above sea level. There are protected areas on Karakaleng on the main island, and this protected area covers around 246.7 square kilometres. Some of the birdwing's territory does overlap with these wildlife reserves. The main island of Karakaleng is mountainous, suggesting there's limited habitat for the lowland birdwing. In its other islands where it exists, there are no protected areas on the Sangi Islands to the southwest, and a lot of this main island is again mountainous. Reindels birdwing has been assessed as near threatened. This species has a very restricted range on Yamdina and the Sira Islands in the Tanimbar island group of Indonesia. Very little information is available for this species on its habitats, ecology, and specific distribution. Very little is also known about its population status. It's never been reported from altitudes above 200 metres above sea level. On Yamdina, the main island, there is a protected area which overlaps with some of the lowland region on the west of the island where the birdwing is thought to occur. The Paradise birdwing has been assessed as near threatened. Similarly to the southern-tailed birdwing, it is found in mainly West Papua, and Papua New Guinea. It is widespread, though very localized, in northern mainland Papua and has been reported from a number of adjacent islands. This species also overlaps with a number of other birdwings and has a relatively wide if fragmented distribution. This is a lowland species occurring below 500 metres in altitude. The southern-tailed birdwing has been assessed as near threatened. This species is widely distributed across lowland areas of West Papua, and Papua New Guinea. The relatively localized threat of logging is likely to divide the range of this species into more than 10 localities. This species overlaps again with a number of other birdwings and has a relatively wide if fragmented distribution. We've heard about the status of the next two species from other speakers, but I will spend just a little bit of time discussing them to finish off the story. First of all, the Richmond birdwing. It's been assessed as near threatened. Richmond birdwing is a subtropical rainforest species, including littoral and gallery forests. As we've heard already, the food plants are the Aristolochia praevenosa, which is really found on the lowland coastal areas with the altitude below 600 meters, and in the more montane areas above 800 meters, the food plant is Aristolochia lehania. An extensive conservation program has been running for more than 30 years, with a vast amount of community involvement, as well as government involvement to help conserve this species. The Borneo birdwing has been assessed as vulnerable. The Borneo birdwing has been reported from the montane areas of Sabah and Sarawak, as well as the Brunei Highlands and North Kalimantan in Indonesia. However, this birdwing stronghold is Mount Kinabalu, primarily at elevations between 1,000 and 1,500 meters above sea level. Protected areas cover much of its known range. So moving on to conclude this talk, I want to leave you with some key messages and thoughts about the next steps. The specific threats to birdwings are not always very clear and much more information is needed. Habitat loss through deforestation for logging and agricultural development is an overriding theme. Most birdwings are lowland species and are more risk than montane species whose habitats suffer less from logging pressure. However, montane species are more at risk from climate change, which is reducing the area of habitat suitable for them. Protected area systems are currently inadequate for the secure conservation of birdwings. This preliminary analysis reveals that even these, arguably the most iconic of all butterflies, are not being given sufficient consideration in the establishment of protected areas across the region. And even when the protected areas appear to overlap a threatened birdwing's distribution, there is very limited information available to be sure of its security. Unfortunately, commercial butterfly collecting is still common practice in many protected areas across the region. The life histories of birdwings are surprisingly poorly understood and require much greater study as a basis for conservation action plans. Key to this is understanding the larval food plants' identities and availability in the right habitats. The genus Aristolochia is in immediate need of taxonomic revision. Local landowners and community bodies need to understand the significance of their birdwing heritage and engage in the protection of these iconic species. Governments and protected area authorities need to do more to encourage pride in this legacy. Local landowners must obtain some value from protection of the birdwings in their stewardship. Many are living in relative poverty, and their efforts to conserve birdwings for future generations should be compensated. Next steps. The Swallowtail and Birdwing Butterfly Trust will build on this initial and preliminary evaluation to foster research and conservation action on the ground, in cooperation with local NGOs and community groups. To conclude, the principal challenges include the existence and effectiveness of protected areas, lack of information on life histories and food plants, and appreciation of the importance of birdwings in local communities. Thank you for listening. Here are our contact details along with links to the website and how to sign up for our newsletter.